Thanks for tuning in to The World We Want, the NAAEE Podcast, a project of the North American Association for Environmental Education. If these episodes resonate with you, after the podcast, check out our website, which contains opportunities for professional development, resources for educators and administrators, and guidance on how you can incorporate environmental education into a broader teaching strategy. Visit us at NAAEE.org/podcast. And thanks for listening.
Welcome to The World We Want, the NAAEE Podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Jerry Ellis. And with decades of global conservation filming, and a fair bit of it in Uganda and more recently Cameroon, I've seen firsthand the ability of education to impact lives and inspire a new generation of global educators. The World We Want podcast is NAAEE shining a light on environmental education efforts and educators from around the world.
Or the work we do as young people, as the change agents that we are. But how do I replicate? How do I get more people empowered? So I decided to train leaders, to train other people. I believe in leadership continuity. That is the legacy I want to leave.
The African continent faces enormous environmental challenges, but a new generation is resolute in finding solutions with energy, determination, and finding inspiration in a global community. On this episode, we focus the spotlight on two young African leaders, Ritchie Tusabe from Uganda and Harrison Ashangwa from Cameroon. Harrison, an environmental engineer, climate action leader, and youth mentor, is dedicated to advancing sustainable development and climate justice in his country of Cameroon. Ritchie created the Youth Environmental Stewards Initiative in Kampala suburb with the goal of helping Ugandan youth leverage their environmental challenges in a way that created economic opportunities while caring for the planet. Both Harrison and Ritchie have seen the challenges their countries face because of global behaviors that have impacted their communities. Through their work and their words, they show us that these challenges come with solutions built into them, that it takes determination, collaboration, and dedication to bridge the two. You're listening to The World We Want, and if you're new to the podcast or to environmental education, you should know that The World We Want podcast is a production of NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education. And now I'm delighted to welcome Ritchie and Harrison to The World We Want. Hi, Richard and Harrison. It is really great to have you on the World We Want podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to be sharing more about the world that we want. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, we are so happy to be here. Personally, I am happy to be here to talk about our work, our stories, and we hope we can help change the world one story at a time.
And I really want to know about both of your stories because a lot of the people that we've had on the podcast are older. They've been in environmental education a long time. And you guys are younger, you're new to it, and there's a lot I'm sure you're looking at in the future. But I want to start, what's interesting to me is both of you have agriculture backgrounds, you both farming background, families and things. So you, Harrison, you're from Cameroon.
Yeah, from Cameroon. Yeah.
Let's start with you.
Yeah, so my journey has been quite interesting. I remember as a child, I grew up in the outdoors. My mother was a smallholder farmer, so we basically grew up in the farm. So we learned cultivating, how the importance of how the farm will supports our family and our community. So that kind of shaped me as a young person. But I was quite intrigued by what was happening around me. So at a young age, I wanted to study engineering. So I went to the university with a goal to study civil engineering. But along the way in the university, at some point, I lost my mother while in the university. So my father took over my mother's farm work. So normally in Cameroon, we have two seasons, the wet season and the rainy season, and the dry season. So rainy season and dry season. And basically, when the rains come in sometime around April, that's when people go out to plant their crops. So I called my dad sometime in June to ask how farm work was. He told me that since April, they haven't had rain. So they just wait for the rains to come so that they can plant. So that got me so worried, so intrigued. I was just getting into the university and I was excited, studying math, physics, and some structures. But I was so worried because I knew what farm work meant for my family. I knew how it supported me while growing up. So I started learning about climate change. I started reading, doing some research. And the U.S. Embassy, I remember the U.S. Embassy in my country, they had some program and it was a Young African Leaders Initiative. So I went for one of their events. They were talking about climate change and it was so eye-opening. I got so interested in climate change. So I came back, read a lot about climate change, got so many information that I wanted. And this opened a new world for me. So that's a little bit about my journey. And I think it's really inspiring. It's a little story, a little trying to learn from where you come from. I think is quite important.
Well, let's hear where you come from, Richard.
When Harrison was speaking, I was really like, in Africa, every country is more or less a home to everyone. So I highly resonate with his experience, only that for my case, I can say I didn't have a chance to grow with my parents, first of all. Both of them passed away at a very young age. And of course, I grew up from Kalangala district, that is Sese Islands on Lake Victoria. And when our dad was the last person to pass on, and when he passed on, I was adopted by some Good Samaritan who took us to school. But I can say that to me, my inspiration and motivation to join the journey in environmental education dates back, I can say, from my childhood. Of course, growing up in Uganda, a country where almost half of the population lives on less than $1 a day, and of course, having gone through the same circumstances without any parental support and seeing other many young people suffer the same circumstances, that only really triggered me and motivated me to use my little education to go back and share with the young people in the communities about how best they can leverage on the environmental challenges and probably turn them into opportunities to sustain their lives. I like calling that using the gown to develop the town, trying to use my little education to go back and share with those who haven't had the experience in the schools. But I can say all that journey would not have materialized to that level without my education. I did this right from high school, where I got introduced to 5 major subjects in humanitarian studies. That was history, geography, economics, entrepreneurship, and general paper.
Entrepreneurship?
Yeah, high school. And I remember, but mostly geography, economics, and entrepreneurship are the ones that were highly pivotal in giving me a ground to join the university on a bachelor's degree called Arts in Environmental Management. And of course, throughout my entire 3 years at Makerere University, that degree introduced me to lots of environmental studies and developmental studies.
So along the way, studying environmental engineering, I realized actually that lack of awareness was a serious issue. And I remember a friend of mine who was studying in Ghana, he realized also, so we started a project together, AgriHot. It was all about educating farmers, try to look at how they can adapt to climate change. And it was quite interesting for me. And sometime in 2016, 2017, I started in International Student Environmental Coalition in Cameroon, and we formalized our work, started getting into schools, engaging communities. Since I was in the CD, engaging cities, engaging everyone in the community around environmental education. But of course, I'm still a trained engineer. And while I do some technical work, I also believe that with the power of awareness. People can take action when they don't know what is happening. So I've seen the power of environmental education. And interestingly, over the years, I've seen how the work we do inspires young people. We had an environmental education activity in a school in Yaoundé sometime in 2019. After I had spoken to the students, a young lady came to me and said she wants to be like me when she leaves school. That touched my heart so much. I'm kind of like a mentor to this young person because of what she saw when we came to their school to talk about environmental issues. So stories like that inspire me a lot. I mentor a lot of young people in Cameroon across our networks in 32 countries, and it gives me a lot of optimism about what young people can really do when they get the right mentorship, the right support, the right resources. And that's what we try to do at the International Student Environmental Coalition. So that's a little bit about my journey.
When I joined the university, I met Dr. Frank Mugaga in our geography department from Makerere University. Most of the global south countries, why we are suffering in terms of environmental issues and climate change is basically because our safety nets are very low. And in terms of resilience, in terms of bouncing back, if we are faced by any environmental disasters, it's not very easy to cope because of the poverty, because of the unemployment. And to me, waste management as a serious environmental concept was really very, very spot on. So I remember from then, we visited different companies which were doing cycling and went the communities to see how people are turning around waste into products. So there we graduated in 2015, and I and Professor Frank, plus other colleagues from the class, were able to form an organization, a youth-oriented organization called Youth Leading Environmental Change, or YLEC. And waste management became one of the number one activities we could now train other young people in the communities. So from there, that carried on until now, just recently in 2020, when I founded another organization called Global Initiative for Young Environmental Stewards, which I lead right now. And upcycling as another concept in waste management is one of the key practical environmental skills that we are training our Green Champions clubs in the schools.
Ritchie, I've traveled quite a bit in Uganda and from Kampala to the countryside, and there is an incredible disparity between that. I mean, you have Kampala and Entebbe area, the capital. You know, you've got huge buildings and busy streets and lots of people. And what is a priority to the people there, especially the kids, is very different than what you see out in the country, where it's a rural area, farming, banana groves and stuff. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how your projects bridge that gap, and especially how you instill in the kids in the countryside the values of continuing to do what they do around environmental education.
If I can go, I can say you indeed visited Uganda from only that statement, that question, because it highly takes me back to, there's a place called Soroti, that's in the eastern part of the country. And Soroti district is where we have implemented much of our projects. We started with a project called SIP, that is Clean Environment Initiative Project. And it was running in 20 schools. We started with 7 schools. Then we got much better funding to 20 schools. But we are training school children or students in their environment clubs, these practical environmental skills on a termly basis. We choose one teacher to be their patron, but we don't end there. After the first phase of the project, we learned that these kids were supposed to go back home to their communities and implement the skills they are learning from the schools. But whenever they could go back home, as if the ideas they were taking home were a little bit alienated to their parents and the relatives and the friends in the communities. So we said, let's have something that unites them with now the parents and the members of the community. So what we did this time around in the second phase, we make sure that on the environment club, instead of having now environmental clubs, we call them school community environment committees. So that when we select students, we have teachers, we have a little bit of their parents or the members of the community, the business people, the people who are doing farming, plus some leaders of the local councils, and the district levels. So that helps to answer the question that we've been always fidgeting around. How do we bridge the intergenerational gap? How do we bring the parents, our grandparents, our other, members of the community be part of these kind of initiatives? So that has really helped us a little bit, because the project starts with an awareness seminar where all members of the community are part of it. We tell them what we are going to do, how it benefits them, how they can be part of the initiatives. And they have really appreciated it, because we feel like we keep talking about the youth, by the way. We've had these conversations, but the youth don't own the land. Much as we want to teach them about tree planting, if you want maybe an environmental project or initiative to thrive and succeed, even if it's for the young people sometimes don't have the legitimacy. They don't have the land. Look at schools. Who accords time? It is the teachers, it is the school administration, and they are the mature adults. So literally, we have a strong duty to make sure that, yes, we bridge that gap. And that's one way we do it, by making sure that on our committees, we have the parents, we have the community members, and we have the leaders. Yeah, I think that's very spot on our activities. But it's not also very clear. It's not also very clear, because the adults who bring their ideas and the kids will be like, this is old school, or this is old fashioned. But you have to make sure that you keep bridging, because we cannot work in isolation. But I should say that not throughout that entire journey, like I told you as we were starting, I did not know that the work I was getting committed to is called environmental education. I should really admit and thank NAAEE, because last year when they introduced us, they awarded us the CEE Change Fellowship. And throughout this whole year, when we've been training through the workshops and the CAP mini grant that we got and the project that we implemented, is when my understanding of the term environmental education has come to fruiting. And right now, I can really say that, I'm an environmental educator, cutters of the experiences and the mainstreaming of the term and its complexities and what really it involves by NAAEE. So I can literally say that has been my journey, right from childhood, then my education experience, the work experience, but the climax has been this CEE Change Fellowship Program by NAAEE.
So for me, I feel like being a mentor to others, it really helped me to shape other young people, because there's this mindset in Africa, maybe in Cameroon. I'm not sure Ritchie will agree with me if it is the way it is in Uganda, but there are a lot of notions that young people have around maybe environmental education. Maybe I can just get into this since we started this conversation. Environmental education, my experience is, it's not in Cameroon. It's not like it's people, we practice environmental education. We do these things. We inspire people. We teach people. We help them build the skills that they need to identify the challenges that they face in their communities, to be able to solve this problem. But of course, I've been practicing it. When I was recognized as a 30 under 30 in 2022 by NAAEE, and the resources available, it actually opened my mind. But of course, these are things that we've been doing. If we look now, there's something they call traditional environmental knowledge. That's the part of environmental education. But it is not connoted as such, maybe in our context. But we practice these things. So maybe it's not formal. And also thinking about this as well, I feel like the careers around maybe environmental education, they are not as broad as they are in my context.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Albright from NAAEE. You know, the best part of this podcast is the opportunity to share the incredible stories of the educators and leaders who are making a difference for our planet through education. But what drives this work forward is hearing how these conversations resonate with you. We love hearing your comments, so please let us know what you think. Recently, after listening to episode 4, When You Wonder You're Learning, Emily from Pennsylvania shared this message with us.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to leave a message about how much I appreciate the NAAEE podcasts. I've been so inspired by what I can continue to do for my kiddos in and outside of the classroom in my own career as an environmental educator and a special education teacher. If you are a nature lover, an early childhood or primary age group teacher, even someone who has littles and you're not a teacher and you just love being outside, I would highly suggest listening to these podcasts. They always inspire me to try something new, look at something with a different perspective. And I even use the Ask It basket in my own classroom to help promote curiosity and wonder for my students. Thank you, NAAEE, and I hope everyone else is just as inspired as I have been.
Emily, thank you so much for sharing that. That is exactly the enthusiasm and invigoration that really keeps this podcast going. So thank you for sharing. And we'd love to hear from others too. So please connect with us on social media. You can find us at the NAAEE, or you can email us at podcast@NAAEE.org. And now, speaking of passion and dedication, let's get back to the conversation with Ritchie and Harrison, who have so much more to share about their work in environmental education.
Both of you, when you look at your lives to this point, you sit in a quiet moment, you're on the airplane flying from Cameroon and from Uganda here or something, where do you see this journey for yourselves? Where are you in the journey when you think about your journey?
This keeps me sometimes want to shed a tear because at Yes Global Initiative, why I founded that organization, I have things that I say, there are like 4 or 5 that I say that keeps me awake every day, rather every night. It's one, Uganda being with the highest youth population in the world. Every time I see the young people and I look at my journey, I feel like we have a long way to go. And we must wake up and find some solutions to solve the status quo, the kind of, the environmental situation and the poverty and the living conditions that we are going through, because it is very hard these days to separate environmental issues, health issues, poverty. It's very hard. So to me, if it is a journey of, let me say, 100 miles, I feel like I'm just on mile 1. Yeah, I feel like I've just started. Yeah, I feel like I've just started. I have a long way to keep thinking of the probably initiatives, ideas. So I feel like the journey has just begun. We need a lot to do with thinking of which projects, which ideas, which networks, which partnerships. Where do we get the money to even fund the programs? Because we know we cannot implement any programs and ideas without the money. So all those kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I highly resonate a lot with Ritchie. The similarities of Uganda and Cameroon, maybe across the African continent, they are our realities are quite similar, this with some peculiar differences, but across the continent we are quite similar. And to talk about where I am in my journey, maybe when I look at my life, when I look at the journey, and I try to think about challenges, opportunities. And for me, it's all about the hope that I give to the young people. And when I was young, my mother told me that, son, challenges are meant to be there, that you need to take on challenges head on. And when you take a challenge, you either learn something or you either accomplish something. So if you don't accomplish something, taking on a challenge, you will learn a lesson. Are we really doing enough when it comes to solving the challenges that people go through daily in their lives? Of course, our work inspires a lot of young people. And this is one thing I've noticed. Young people need a push. Young people need support. Young people need mentorship. It's quite important when it comes to environmental education, when it comes to addressing climate challenges, when it comes to addressing the issues that people are confronted with daily in their lives. So I feel like as going forward in my journey, I might not have accomplished a lot, but when I look at the people who look up to me for mentorship, I feel like it's been impactful. Like, people can look up to me that this is a figure that it has helped shape their life, maybe given them some opportunities. I'm happy, but there's still a lot that we have to do as young people on the African continent, maybe as a young person in Cameroon, as a global citizen, of course. That's something that keeps me going. And for us at the International Student Environmental Coalition, we work in 32 countries. And as the executive director, I discuss with all our leaders. And sometimes they come to me daily with their challenges. And to balance maybe environmental education, because most of these people, they work as volunteers and they are not paid for this job, for this work that they do. They are doing inspiring work, impactful work in their communities, but they are not paid for the work. So sometimes for them to balance their livelihood, the challenges of their daily lives with the work that they do, it's kind of hard. So sometimes I feel like I'm a support system to them. I told my young leaders that anytime you have any challenge, come to me. We'll figure this out. So again, it's inspiring to see that young people are ready to take the lead. But sometimes they just need that initial push, that spark. Like recently I was discussing with our young leaders in Chad. They are currently organizing events around the local conference of youth, which is like an annual conference organized by the Youth Constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change, YONGO. So when I look at the work they are doing, they are engaging rural communities to talk about climate change. There was a part of Chad, of N'Djamena, the capital of Chad, that was flooded recently. And these young people, they go into these communities, they are trying to build resilience. They are trying to talk about these people, about early warning. They are trying to do it with basically little or no resources. And that is so impactful. At the end of the day, they need that support. They need people to look up to. They need institutions that can support them. I've seen the differences between the availability of resources for people who engage in climate action or environmental education in the global north and those in the global south. I appreciate this opportunity that NAAEE is given to us. Ritchie mentioned about the CEE Change Fellowship. It's an exciting opportunity. But how many people get these opportunities? But how do I replicate? How do I get more people empowered? So I decided to train leaders, to train other people. I believe in leadership continuity. If my organization, I stayed in Italy for 2 years, but my young people back home, they are able to carry on activities without my presence. That is the legacy I want to leave. Or the work we do as young people, as the change agents that we are. And when I wrote a blog post for my project, I said, I want to train more leaders. because we were selected as 30 fellows. The African continent has 1.5 billion people. So in Cameroon, we're over 30 million. If I could train just 40 and they go back to their communities and they can replicate this is how we create a movement that can actually build something sustainable. So for me, this is how I see things basically. And I think it's been helpful for me because when I look back at the journey, where I am, where I'm going to, it's like I've done something. Maybe if I consider 100 miles, I would say there's still a lot to do, but I would say 30 miles is something I can actually talk about. Because when I look at the impact of our work, I look at the young people that come to me, I look at how things are going in these countries, and it's important. I'm recognizing the challenges ahead, but I also need to look at what we've done and be able to gain a certain level of momentum. Because environmental education, climate change work, sometimes it can be overwhelming when reaction is not happening. Because I say this, if you want change can come through individual action and systemic change. So we have people do things individually and collectively it brings change. There's also systemic change that we need, and it comes through policies. And policies are not implemented in space. Policies are implemented by people. So at the end of the day, people are the center of everything. So we need to get people along. And I'm so happy that Ritchie mentioned a couple of things. And it's important we look also at the educational system. Why I believe that our educational system should be geared towards solving challenges, solving problems, real problems that people face in their lives. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD, a master's degree, and you cannot address issues that people see around them. That is really important, because if we want to think long term, we need to be able to make sure that our projects, our activities are self-sustaining. I was just telling Ritchie, he mentioned waste management. Waste management is a problem all over the world. But the African continent faced this challenge. And studies shows that by 2050, 60 to 70% of people will be living in cities in Africa. So that's a whole challenge. These are opportunities. So how do you train people to see waste not as waste, but as opportunities? How do they start social enterprises? How do they start doing things that will actually give them income? Because if they don't have income, they cannot really survive. So it's important. And I'm inspired by the work Ritchie is doing. Upcycling, we do this as well. But sometimes you are limited. But I believe that as we work together, as we collaborate, as we learn, as we go around, we see these things. We learn from experiences, maybe in America, maybe in Europe. This is how it shaped us as leaders, as young people. And I'm really excited to get back home. Someone asked me yesterday that, what am I really excited to do? Like, I said, I'm excited to get back home because I have this burst of ideas in my head from this conference, from all these experiences, from talking to people like Ritchie, from talking to the other fellows, from talking to other educators. This gives you this kind of energy that you have. Life is full of challenges. We take the challenges head on. If we don't accomplish something, we learn from the experience, from the challenges. So for me, that's how I see my journey. And I'm happy to share this story, to talk to people. And for me, I feel like being a mentor to others, it really helped me to shape other young people. Because there's this mindset in Africa, maybe in Cameroon. I'm not sure Ritchie will agree with me if it is the way it is in Uganda, but there are a lot of notions that young people have around maybe environmental education. Maybe I can just get into this since we started this conversation. Environmental education, my experience is, it's not in Cameroon. It's not like it's we practice environmental education. We do these things. We inspire people. We teach people. We help them build the skills that they need to identify the challenges that they face in their communities to be able to solve this problem. But we have not had this formal definition of it. I really got to learn more about environmental education but of course, I've been practicing it. When I was recognized as a 30 under 30 in 2022 by NAAEE, and the resources available, it actually opened my mind. But of course, these are things that we've been doing. If we look now, there's something they call traditional environmental knowledge. That's the part of environmental education. But it is not connoted as such, maybe in our context. But we practice these things. So maybe it's not formal. And also thinking about this as well, I feel like the careers around maybe environmental education, they are not as broad as they are in my context. Maybe in the US, I realize it's quite broad. Environmental education is a very broad discipline.
How do you build a bridge between your grandparents and those older people farmers around you who still are practicing environmental education? They just don't call it that. To this new generation who are migrating to the cities, who are becoming more urbanized, who look at devices as a path to the future.
Some guy was saying that they published a book or a report where they realized that a huge number of the young people in America are very unhappy. It's called the Happiness Report, I guess, or Happiness Podcast. And they realized that a huge number of the American young people are unhappy nowadays. And some of the reasons are because most of them are so much on their phones. They feel they can do everything on their phones. And that's a little bit lonely to me. There is no sorts of social interactions. So I feel like if there can be ways we can reintroduce the social connections where our parents used to sit with us and tell us stories. My father died, was the last one to die, but I think he died when I was around 6. And around 5 years, he could tell us lots of stories, and most of them, we still have them on our memories. And that was very interesting. So if we can have those platforms once again where we can have fire conversations, where we can have even write materials, but the materials, I think the Western world has that where the parents read stories or books to their kids. Can now the parents start to read even environmental books and stories to their kids before maybe you go to sleep reading for your cartoon? Can we have ways of somebody can read for you about how the ozone layer has been affected? Thank God I heard that it was rejuvenated. But how the greenhouse gas is affecting our atmosphere, how can we be part of that? So I feel like if we can develop materials probably that can connect parents, maybe use them to teach the kids, that will be super cool. Programs like these ones, the kids don't much listen to them somehow. These are programs by the adults sometimes. And if we have as many as possible who can subscribe, I feel like the better. Thank God these days social media is everyone, where even our grandparents, when they get a smartphone, you will see them on TikTok. How I wish there would be an algorithm developed that now starts to filter this traditional indigenous knowledge and good knowledge and stories into our day-to-day systems. I feel like if we can develop technologies, algorithms that can really bridge us together, that's a great way to go.
Yeah, I think when Ritchie was talking, something came to my mind, social connections, how it has evolved over time from where I come from. So presently, I stay in Douala. Since you said you've been in Cameroon, I don't know if you know about Douala. But Douala,
I've been caught in the traffic in Douala for hours, trying to get across the bridge to go to Limbe. I've spent a whole lifetime on that bridge. Speaking of bridges.
So actually, Douala, it's in a way, it's a typical city. It's so congested. Maybe the year you went there, nowadays it's probably worse than the way you were before you went there. So what I'm trying to say is this. How do we, because people are so far from nature, even in the cities, people are so far away from nature. I remember growing up as a child, my best time was spending time with my maternal grandmother and paternal grandmother. So both grandparents, the grandparents on both sides. And during this time, I enjoyed hearing stories from my grandparents. These stories actually shaped me as a young person, shaped me how I see life. The wisdom that these people used to dish out, it's not education. They were not educated, but they had a lot of wisdom just based on the life they've lived, how they understand the environment, how they understand the asset. In my rural community, there's no plastic waste issue there, but people still survive. People live daily. But nowadays, the people there, they don't want to stay. They want to leave and get to the city. They want to leave those environments and go back to the city. In Cameroon, more than 60% of the population is below 30 years old. And this is the generation that want this lifestyle that the West has. Like, they're excited to have these devices, this gadget. They want to travel. They don't want to stay in the rural areas. They don't want any of that. They want to be in the city. They want to stay in large houses, big houses, consume a lot of energy. They want to have own cars. They want this lifestyle that has gotten us to where we are in terms of the climate crisis. But how do you discourage these people? How do you tell them that this is not the way to go? That's a kind of dilemma. That's something that is quite challenging to me. I think what they used to judge a good life, it's far from sustainable. It's far from what we want. They want cars. They want big houses. They want to have all the new electronic devices. They want to travel, whether it's sustainable or not sustainable. They want to eat food. They want to eat food that is processed. They want chemicals. They don't want to eat organic. They don't want to eat natural. So this is actually a serious challenge that I think one of the most important, but I also, just to reiterate the fact that education, maybe trying to really get them when they are young people. There's a generation that we've missed. I think if you look at, there's a generation of young people that we've missed. There's no way you can convince them. Unfortunately so. I've worked with people, the very young ones, the adults, and the ones who are just building careers. So I think that we can channel our energy to the very young people who are still growing up. That's quite very important. I think the energy there, it will be more sustainable. Try to connect them back to where we came from. I think that to me, it's really important. In addition to what Ritchie said, because I'm in Douala, but I love going back home. When I go, I see my father. I sit with him. I can sit with my father for 4 hours. He talks to me about what has happened, the situation, and the wisdom that he gives. That is what we need.
You said a word, you said discourage them from going. I think maybe that's part of the problem. We've been trying to discourage young people. We should be encouraging them to go the other way.
Yeah.
We should come up with ideas that, they're drawn by all these things, right? When I listen to people who have come on the podcast and talk about the world they want, they talk about passion and joy. Maybe what we need to do is create some kind of vehicle that encourages young people to go towards their passions. because their passions can be sustainable.
Yeah.
The joy can be sustainable. And especially where you live, across, everywhere in the world with young people. It's Indonesia, it could be South America, it doesn't matter. But because I'm very familiar with Equatorial Africa, but how do we encourage, maybe instead of discourage people from doing things?
We just have to be mindful what we might call what we are calling for, because if we encourage now the young people to follow their passion unguidedly, we never know what their passion could be. When do we get time as parents to talk to these kids? So there is a huge kind of disconnect. I wish we can try as much as possible to bring them back, but also keep talking to the young people as much. I like the civic education or engagement thing in this CEE change, because I feel like that's where there is much of the life, where I talk about life and society and connections and how people grow up together in a more connected and responsible way. I also feel like kids or the young people, the folks who are listening to us right now, you need to come back on the table to your parents. Come back home. Listen to them. Kids, the young people, the youth, it's time to start to listen to our parents. Love them back, support them, understand them, be with them. Don't try as much as possible to run away from them. And much as the parents also, we do our best. We are very much unruly as the young people because of the bubble in this global space. But you always have to find a way to come back home. So programs that will draw us together, incentives that will attract these kids to love nature, come back to the systems. I feel like that should be the way to go. Speaking of education, the indigenous knowledge, we don't have so much of the research that is being done in the field of indigenous knowledge. I feel like there needs to be more money invested in that field. And after the research is collected or done, analyzed, let it be disseminated back to the communities so that we can really appreciate. Because much of it is just dying off. We don't have the coffers where it is being stored, No books that much talks about those stories. The earlier we invest more money in indigenous knowledge and research and disseminate more about it and show its relevancy, I feel like the more we are trying to bridge that gap, not to look at this.
And just to maybe add, I feel like this issue of passion, how do you help young people find their passion and develop that passion? Sometimes children don't end up following their passion. They follow what their parents want. And of course, in our society, that is how it is. So I would say in Cameroon, we say that the society is a reflection of the family. If the society is broken, the family is broken. So we need to go back to the basics. And the basic unit of a society is a family. And we need to get back to that table, that family. How do you nurture children from within the family? For example, you are an educator in school. You're an environmental educator in a school. You just play a part in the child's life. But I think part of the child's life is shaped by the experiences he or she gets from the home, or maybe the community as well. So I believe that this should be a holistic kind of thing, and it should start from within the family. I still borrow from wisdom from my grandparents. And in Cameroon, one thing you can determine that this knowledge is actually eroding, our local dialects. Our young people are not interested in learning. And there's so much knowledge, traditional knowledge, that is attached to our local dialect. And if this generation are not interested in learning the language the local language, which has the culture embedded in it, which has these sustainable practices embedded in it, it will be so difficult. But the family as a unit needs to be involved to nurture the children. We cannot just focus on the children as educators. How do you get their families involved? I don't know if Rishi has a perspective towards this, but I love the idea of the communities, the committees that you set up. Leaders are involved, the parents are involved. That's an interesting aspect of it. But I've not seen this in Cameroon. I think the war that I really want to see is a war where we all understand that we are one human race. And what really joins us together is more than what separates us. When we should believe in our humanity. That's what I really believe in. That's the war I want. Because regardless of your color, your gender, your religion, whatever you believe in, it's just one human race. And that's what keeps us together. And there's nothing that separates us. What joins us together is far more than what separates us. So we should really capitalize on that. And I really hope our differences, people will be able to deal with us daily, taking our differences into consideration.
Yeah, your voices are very important. So thank you.
Thank you so much for really having us, giving us this opportunity. I really thank NAAEE for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much for having us once again.
Thank you so much.
Uganda and Cameroon, like so many countries across the globe, face mounting environmental pressures. Ritchie and Harrison represent a new generation. And NAAEE is nurturing this generation through mentorship, trainings on environmental stewardship and sustainability, together creating a more caring, vibrant, and sustainable world. To find out more about global tools for nature-based education and explore resources for every educator, start by visiting our website at NAAEE.org/podcast. That's NAAEE.org/podcast. A special thanks goes out to our entire team, Carrie Albright, Judy Browse, Jimena Cuenca, and Stacy Pierpoint, with additional production support from nonprofit Globio. And a special thanks goes out to you for being a part of this world we want. We hope these conversations lead you to take action in your own world every day, making it more and more the world we all want. I'm your host, Jerry Ellis. Join us next time to hear more stories of individuals and communities creating a better future through the power of education. Thanks for listening, and thanks for sharing the world we want, the NAAEE Podcast.